sellers, your sale may be at risk. I'll get into that, and then the latest home prices and insights for York Region for week ending June the 4th, 2025. There's lots of different parts to the sales process. The purchase agreement, you got your purchase price, deposit, closing date, conditions, and they all have their value and their own level of importance. The deposit part is often overlooked, and that's what I want to focus on now, the deposit part. A lot of people feel or believe that the deposit, in a sense, ratifies the deal. So when the purchase agreement is accepted, the deposit that comes in by the next day, usually within 24 hours, that's the standard written, what's written in the standard agreement of purchase and sale. The fact that it's due the next day, once the deposit is in, the sellers are like, yes, the deposit is in, and it kind of ratifies the deal. And that's a misunderstanding. The minute the agreement is signed, you have an agreement in place. It's a legal contract now. And if there was no deposit, if the buyer says, I changed my mind, the seller can still sue the buyer because the buyer would be in breach. They can't change their mind once the agreement is signed. However, here's the importance of the deposit. If there's no money put in by the buyer, it's a lot easier for the buyer to say, I changed my mind, or for whatever reason, not close, just because they got no skin in the game. And it's harder for the seller now, although they still have to sue. The buyer's got no skin in the game, and the buyer's attitude could be, well, sue me, and a lot of sellers are just not going to go through that process. But if the buyer has a big chunk of money already sitting in trust until closing, the buyer's attitude is hey, if I don't close, they're going to take my deposit. And although the seller still has to sue, well, the buyer doesn't have access to their deposit money anymore either. So the buyer has this sense of, I'm going to lose this money. And it's true, they probably will if the buyer is in breach. So that's the significance of the deposit. Usually the deposit amount, although there's nothing written in stone and there's no set rule, the deposit, as far as market standards go right now, Martin practices, it's usually about 5% of the purchase price. So we had a situation recently on one of our listings. We received an offer and we were getting ready to accept. I was representing the seller. We're getting ready to accept. And the buyer agent calls and says, oh, by the way, we need to make a change before it's accepted. My client doesn't have the full deposit amount immediately. They're going to pay some now and some later. Now, this was a substantial sale. It was an expensive home. And so the deposit was also a substantial amount. And the buyer's agent's attitude is that the buyer would put $5,000 now, and then the rest, so the majority of the deposit would come in 2 weeks. And I'm speaking with my client, the seller, about the pitfalls in taking little now and the rest later. And the seller's attitude was, again, my client's the seller, his attitude was, look, I'm not prepared to take so little, but if they come up with half, then I'm okay with half now and then the other half in 2 weeks. The reason the buyer didn't have all the money could be any number of reasons. The majority of the money could be tied up in investment and whatnot. It doesn't really matter to the situation. It's just they wanted to put so little down and then the majority later. Well, that's what I expressed to the buyer's agent, that what you're suggesting, the $5,000 now, the rest later, is not going to work for my client, the seller. But he'll be okay if you put half now and then half later. And so that's eventually what we agreed to, and we worked things out, and everything worked out okay. But if you're a seller right now, it could happen And we've seen this where all the money's not there. The buyer doesn't have the full deposit amount. If you take such little deposit now and the rest later, you're at risk of that other part, that other deposit not coming in. So you still want to really push for a more substantial amount upfront, just because the risk of the buyer, when there's so little money down, saying, you know what, I changed my mind, is always present. So having such little money down upfront, it's as if there was no deposit. Like, what is $5,000 or $10,000 going to do? I know it sounds like a lot of money, but not in the bigger picture of purchasing a home at what average prices are today. And look, this market is so unpredictable. This is the most unpredictable market we've ever had. Buyers walking away can happen. It happens more today in this market than any other time in history. For example, what's stopping one of your neighbors from listing a home cheaper than yours? Well, if the buyer only has a couple of dollars down, not that much, and a new listing comes up that they like better, that's substantially lower than yours, this is the market that those situations can happen in. So just be careful. If you don't get enough deposit, the buyer doesn't have any skin in the game. And although it's still a breach of contract, if the buyer changes their mind and doesn't close or walks away from the deal, if they don't have any skin in the game, it's just too easy for the buyer to take that route, and you as a seller now have the choice, do I sue them or not? If you feel this video can help somebody you know, please pass it along. If you get value from what we're talking about, subscribe. And if you want to speak with me about your real estate situation, selling, buying, it's really simple. Below this video in the description, there's a link to my calendar. Click on that, book a time that's convenient for you, and we'll talk about whatever's on your mind. Now, let's get into the numbers. Here we go, folks. York Region detached properties. Before we get into our weekly programming of Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Markham, let me show you some monthly data here. This is for all of York Region, not just Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Markham, but all of York Region detached properties. I've got some monthly data from where we are now, May 25th, going back to May 2025, going back to May 2021. If we look at sales for May 2025, the May just passed, 584 detached properties were sold across York Region, just detached properties, which is down from where sales were the previous couple years. If we go to May 2023, 874 were sold for May, and it happened to be the most amount of sales for the year, the month of May. The same thing happened in May 2024. Well, it's almost the highest month, but still, we had March, April, May, the highest 3 months. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this May, but we kind of see similar patterns. Sales leading up to May and down, then again in 2024, sales leading up to May and then trending down, and then sales leading up and then trending down. Well, we don't know if they're trending down after this May. That's what we got to keep an eye on. Let's look at average sold price for month ending May 2025. The average sold price of a detached property across York Region was $1,561,000. Compared to the year before, we're currently 7.5% lower. Compared to 2023, the year before that, we're 9.8% lower. Compared to 2022, we're 6.4% lower. You want to compare to 2021, we're 1.7% lower. So basically, for the last several years, average sold price has been trending down. Compared to the most recent years, we're 7, 8, 9% lower over the most recent years. If we go back a little further, if we want to compare to 2020, average price today versus 2020, we're 32.6% higher today. We look at 2019, 40.4% higher is the average sold price today versus 2019 average sold prices. Crazy numbers, they imagine. We're 40% higher than 2019. The reason I'm saying imagine that, because we're constantly looking at the last few years. We're 7% lower, 8% lower. Sellers sometimes that have bought recently are selling below what they bought their home for and losing money. These are the situations, the scenarios that are out there. Here's our regular programming. For week ending June the 4th, that's what we're going to be focused on for detached properties for Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Markham. We're going to start off with Vaughan for week ending June the 4th. 34 detached properties were sold. 5 of those sold at $2 million or more. Overall sales have been trending up. Not necessarily every single week. You see the dips, ups and downs, but overall trending up since the beginning of the year. Average sold price is $1,649,000. It's kind of tricky which way overall average sold price is going. When I look at the chart from this angle here, kind of looks like average price has slowly been trending down, but let's see what the other charts show. Compared to last year, 1,649 is 11% lower. The median price of $1,045,000 is 9% lower. And when we look at the dotted line, the 4-week moving average, basically prices might have been trending up March, April, but since kind of mid-April, they look like they're trending down now. 34 were sold, 29% sold at list price or more. 117 were listed. Active listings, look, it's down slightly just by a few from the previous week, but overall, active listings has been climbing, and months of inventory almost right in the middle of what we would say is a balanced market. 4.3 is the months of inventory. Here's Richmond Hill. Sales for Richmond Hill, they're all over the map here. 23 were sold. That is the single most productive, the single highest week of sales this whole year so far. So 23, and 23 is not a lot of sales, but it is the highest this year in 1 week. 5 of those were at $2 million or more. Average sold price didn't change much from the previous week. It's now at $1,790,000. 1,790 is actually 3% higher than this time a year ago. The median price of 1,705 is 4% higher year over year. 23, I said, were sold, 35% sold at list price or more. 80 were listed. Active listings trending up, although it's down slightly this week, but overall trending up. Months of inventory sitting at the bottom end of a buyer's market at 5.8 months of inventory. But you can see what's happening in Richmond Hill. 6.7, 15.8, 13.3 months of inventory, 5.8 months of inventory. Here's Markham for week ending June the 4th. 29 detached properties were sold. 8 of those sold at $2 million or more. Those 8 had a profound effect on average sold price. We're way up there now at $1,852,000. Before that, I would say average sold price looked like it was trending down. And this is one crazy week. Over the next few weeks, we'll kind of see which way prices are going. But overall, before that, I believe prices in Markham for detached were trending down. Compared to last year, 1852 is 6% higher. The median price of 1458 is 7% lower. So in this case, I'd kind of focus more on the median price, and the dotted line kind of shows that median price is trending down. 29 were sold, 31% sold at list price or more, 91 were listed. Active listings has been trending up, and months of inventory sitting at 3.9, kind of in the middle of what we would call a balanced market. Here's a quick summary. Pretty much we're sitting in a balanced market. And I find myself just repeating myself when I say, but the specifics in your neighborhood, your price point, your home type is really going to determine what kind of market you're buying in or selling in. But overall, pretty much a balanced market. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome day.